Her own son asked her to step out of the family photo on her porch. Evelyn Hart, widow and mother of Greg Hart, didn't flinch. He called it just logistics and laughed with a glass of her wine in hand. By Monday, Greg would be erased from her trust, her deed, and every account he quietly drained. She'd spent decades funding his dream snow. She was dissolving the illusion. And when he came for what he assumed was his birthright, the paperwork would meet him at the door. Before we begin, may I ask where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. They lined up on the lawn, laughing like it was a reunion instead of a ritual. The shutter clicked, and Evelyn Hart, plate of lemon shortbread in hand, was still 10 paces from the frame. She hadn't been asked to join, not even gestured toward. "Just get the core family, Heather," Marcy called brightly, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "You know the kids and us." Heather, camera lifted, hesitated. Her finger hovered above the shutter. Her eyes flicked toward Evelyn, who stood beneath the crepe myrtle, sunlight broken across her shoulders in dappled gold. The kind of light you couldn't plan, the kind photographers chased. Evelyn said nothing. She smiled gently, turned back toward the porch, and vanished inside without a word. The plate of cookies was still warm when she set them on the kitchen island. Nobody followed her in. She heard another shutter snap from outside, then laughter Clare shouting something about Derek's weird tan line, Marcy corralling Mia's hair with a quick twist, Greg telling everyone to just look relaxed. Heather's camera clicked again. Evelyn walked to the sink and ran the water. The soft stream muffled the sound of the afternoon. By dinner time, no one mentioned the photo. Not Greg, not Marcy, not even Clare, who used to curl up beside Evelyn during holidays with a book and a quiet kind of reverence. Now she passed the sweet potatoes without looking up from her phone. The table was long, polished, perfectly set. The dining room lit with gold sconces and the smell of rosemary roast. The estate's bones were old, but Evelyn kept it immaculate, the family crest still etched in the sideboard. Lyle's wine decanter still full. She had set the table herself, ironed the linens, arranged the place cards. She wasn't on the seating chart. There was no name at the head of the table. She sat anyway. No one commented. That night, after the dishwasher hummed to life and the others retreated to guest rooms lit with soft lighting and scented diffusers, Evelyn went up to the attic. The wooden stairs creaked, a familiar rhythm she hadn't heard in years. She flicked on the overhead bulb and reached for the storage chest marked Family Albums. It was heavier than she remembered. She opened it on the old chaise, fingers brushing over thick leather bindings and linen-covered photo books. The albums were arranged by year, each with a spine embossed. Hart Family Holiday. The Hearts of Charleston. Generations. 2009, 2012. She pulled the last 6. The photos were polished, smiling, and utterly complete, or so they appeared. Each frame was a celebration of their legacy. Laughing on the lawn, matching sweaters under the oaks, champagne toasts on the veranda. But not once did Evelyn appear. Not in the group shots, not on the edges, not even as a passing figure in the background. She looked again, slower this time, zooming in with her reading glasses, squinting at reflections in windows and half-cropped shadows. She had been there. She remembered what earrings she wore, what flowers were in bloom, what dish she had cooked for each gathering. But she wasn't in a single frame. Edited out, cropped, excluded, not by accident, by design. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed midnight. Evelyn placed the albums on the floor, opened the bottom drawer of her desk, and pulled out the thick envelope marked Deed, 1989 revision. Her hands didn't shake as she opened it. She unfolded the top page, eyes scanning familiar lines of print. Her signature still sharp in blue ink at the bottom. The final clause stood alone. Sole owner of record, Evelyn Ann Hart. No joint ownership. No co-signers. Just her. She leaned back in her chair, the paper still in hand, and exhaled through her nose not a sigh, not grief. something colder, more certain. The house they stood on, the land they smiled over, the walls they pretended to inherit. They weren't theirs. Not anymore. They took her out of the frame. So Evelyn took herself out of the equation. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains of her study, soft and filtered like a memory. The house was quiet now. Greg and Marcy had packed up the night before, the grandchildren murmuring quick goodbyes like checking items off a list. Not one of them had thanked her for the weekend, or the catered dinner, or the house. Evelyn didn't expect it anymore. She slid her ledger open across the desk. A pen rested beside it, capped neatly in polished brass. She had logged every expense for the last decade with the kind of precision a surgeon might envy. $2,400 private school registration for Mia. $11,850 Claire's first semester at NYU before Marcy insisted they'd take it from there. $1,390 Christmas flights for all 5 of them. $7,200. The photographer's annual retainer. $18,000 roof repair Greg promised to handle and never called back on. Every line item paid from the Hart Family Trust, the same trust Evelyn had built with Lyle, intending it to preserve their legacy, not subsidize their erasure. She flipped to the most recent entry. Holiday weekend, full expense. Every cent of it: flowers, caterer, cleaning staff, place cards drawn from an account that bore her name and no one else's. By noon, she was sitting across from Judge Carr at his private office on Church Street. His space was orderly, old wood and humidity sealed, filled with the scent of paper, leather, and old oak. He looked up from her trust file, adjusting his glasses with a dry sigh. "You want to restructure the Hart Family Trust?" he asked, brows raised. "At your age?" "At my clarity," Evelyn corrected, voice steady. "I've reviewed every transaction since 2012. Not one of them included consent. Only assumption." Carr tilted his head. "Greg and Marcy won't take this lightly." "They haven't taken anything lightly in years," she said. "They've taken it all with entitlement." He nodded once, already flipping to the appropriate forms. "What did you have in mind?" "What of the family trust?" Evelyn said, her fingers folded neatly in her lap. "Wasn't so generous?" He looked up, blinking once. She smiled, not unkindly, but firmly. "Let's begin drafting." That evening, back home, she poured a small glass of wine, not the expensive vintage Greg had bragged about bringing last year, but something she'd chosen herself, a dry Riesling chilled to perfection. She sat in the sunroom as cicadas began their evening hymn, the sky streaked in pink and lavender. Her phone buzzed. "Heather. Sending the family photo. Hope it came out okay. Let me know if you'd like prints." Evelyn opened the attachment. There they were, all 5. Greg's arm around Claire, Marcy holding Mia's shoulders. Derek mid-laugh, his teeth too white, too practiced. The backdrop was perfect, the estate's sweeping lawn, the antique fountain gurgling in soft focus. But something in Heather's framing caught Evelyn's eye. A tilt, a tension, a gap in the composition that suggested space for one more. A space deliberately ignored. She typed back slowly. "Evelyn. Heather, do you have any outtakes?" Her thumb hovered before she hit send. Because sometimes the truth lived in the pictures no one printed. The photos told a story, just not the true one. Evelyn sat at her desk, the glow of the laptop screen washing over her face in soft blue light. Her reading glasses perched low on her nose as she scrolled, mouse clicking through folder after folder labeled with loving names. Hart Holiday 2017, Thanksgiving at the estate, Claire's graduation weekend. They were all beautiful, perfectly posed, golden hour smiles and wind-swept hair, everyone glowing with generational pride. The estate loomed behind them like a cathedral, Greg's blazer always sharp, Marcy always in cream, the children always arranged tallest to shortest, like carefully stacked heirlooms. And Evelyn? She wasn't in a single one. She reached for her wineglass without looking, took a sip, and kept scrolling. Then, a smaller folder tucked near the bottom of Marcy's social media archive caught her attention. Legacy highlights. Evelyn clicked. Each post had been curated with the precision of a campaign. The captions were syrupy, designed to stir nostalgia. 4 generations strong. Family forever. Our roots run deep. There was a black and white filtered shot of the kids on the swing under the oak tree Evelyn planted with Lyle in '78. A staged photo of Greg holding a brandy glass on the veranda. Marcy, leaning over Mia's shoulder with a cookbook Evelyn had handwritten. But not one single image showed Evelyn. She wasn't just untagged. She had been erased. There was no sign of the woman who'd hosted, who'd bought the roast, lit the candles, pressed the linens. No mention. No trace. Evelyn shut the laptop. The knock came at dusk. She opened the front door to find Heather standing on the porch, wind-blown and sheepish, a camera bag slung over her shoulder. She held a small USB drive in one hand. "I hope it's okay," Heather said. I wanted to stop by." Evelyn stepped aside wordlessly, letting the screen door whisper closed behind them. The scent of jasmine hung in the humid air, clinging to the porch columns. "I wanted to apologize," Heather said, removing her sunglasses, revealing tired eyes. "For the photo. For all of them." "You don't owe me an apology," Evelyn said, walking slowly toward the sitting room. "You didn't exclude me. They trained you to." Heather paused, blinking. "What do you mean?" "I watched you flinch, Heather. When she said, 'core family,' you hesitated. Not because you didn't understand the order, but because some part of you knew it was wrong." Evelyn gestured to a seat. "You've worked with this family long enough to know what they want." Heather sat. Her voice dropped. "You were there in the background. Every year. Holding a tray. Standing off to the side. Bringing someone water." "I've always been there," Evelyn said. "They just learned how to crop." Heather held out the USB. "I pulled the outtakes. Every unedited frame, I thought. Maybe you'd want to see what the camera really saw." Evelyn took the drive, her fingers brushing the plastic like it might burn. Later, alone in her study, she loaded the files onto her screen. There she was year after year, standing off to the left while the others laughed, blurred beside a hydrangea bush, half-shadowed on the porch, her reflection caught in a window pane. A hand at the edge of a plate, a profile between curtains. Always there. Never meant to be. In one image, Mia looks right past her, mid-laugh, while Evelyn is frozen behind her, blurred, holding a pitcher of sweet tea. In another, Greg's shoulder obscures her entirely, save for her pearls, gleaming just above the frame line. The photos weren't empty. They were edited. Not by code, but by intention. She clicked through them slowly, each one confirming what she already knew in her bones. She had been made invisible on purpose. They posed for the house. She paid for the roof. Evelyn sat beneath the vaulted ceiling of her study, surrounded by receipts instead of family. The long oak desk, once used for Lyle's estate planning, was now covered in neat, deliberate piles. School invoices, airline confirmations, contractor bills, pharmacy statements. The numbers were cold, exact, but Evelyn could feel every dollar where it had gone, and worse, where it hadn't been appreciated. One folder was labeled in her tidy script, Hart Family Trust, Disbursements 2013, 2023. A decade, Evelyn thought. 10 years of quiet generosity, 10 years of being erased with gratitude. She flipped open the largest folder. Private school tuition for Mia and Derek covered in full. Claire's freshman dorm essentials, charged to the trust, discreetly. Greg's sudden knee surgery in 2019, the one he told Marcy he'd paid for himself? Evelyn's signature lined the check. Marcy's boutique business loan, camouflaged as consulting fees, sat in a ledger entry dated just 2 springs ago. She reached for another manila envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter from Greg, dated 6 years prior. "Hey Mom, really tight this month. Marcy doesn't know I'm asking. Emergency car repair. Can you float us $3,000 just until next pay cycle?" Evelyn had sent 5. She found 5 more just like it, the handwriting less apologetic with each new request. No thank yous, no repayments, just assumption wrapped in formality. It was raining softly outside, the sound tapping at the windows like a polite truth. Evelyn turned to her laptop and logged into her banking portal. She navigated past the familiar summary trust balance, distributions, estate expenses, and opened a separate tab. The Hart Legacy Foundation. Draft. Private use only. The shell of the nonprofit had been waiting for years. Lyle had suggested it once, imagining scholarships and preservation funds. Evelyn clicked the activate prompt and typed in her approval code. Her hand trembled just slightly. Not from fear, from precision. Step 1. Transfer assets. Step 2. Restructure beneficiaries. Step 3. Seal. Permanently. She removed Greg and Marcy from the secondary power of attorney, an authority they'd never used wisely or even acknowledged with thanks. In their place, she listed Carr. And, in a placeholder slot labeled Legacy Advisor, she typed one name, TBD. Judge Carr's voice crackled through the speakerphone a few minutes later. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm past sure," Evelyn replied. "You've left them on the trust for decades." "I left the lights on, too," she said. "Doesn't mean they noticed." There was a pause, then a quiet sigh from the other end. "Evelyn, if you make this shift, it's permanent." "Good," she said. He cleared his throat. "Then I'll file the documents this week. I'll need you to sign in person." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "You've always had the good pens." Later that afternoon, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. Her name was hand-lettered in Claire's neat cursive. Inside was a folded invitation, wrapped in gold twine. Annual Hart Holiday Dinner. Sunday, 6 p.m. Cocktail attire. Below that, in a different, messier hand, Marcy's was scrawled. "Please bring your famous pecan pie," Greg said he forgot to ask last year. "We're counting on you." The envelope fluttered as she laid it down on the hall table unopened, unread past that point. She walked away from it without a word. They erased her with smiles. She erased them with signatures. Evelyn pressed her pen to the page, the ink flowing smoother than she expected, final strokes on a document that had been 3 decades in the making, though she hadn't known it until recently. The pages didn't tremble in her hands. They felt steady, weighty, just like they had when she signed her marriage certificate with Lyle, and years later, when she signed his death papers alone. Only this time, there would be no grief. Judge Carr sat across from her, crisp in his charcoal gray suit, reading glasses perched on his nose, thumb smoothing down the edge of the new estate plan. His office smelled faintly of leather-bound books and old wood polish, the kind Evelyn always found comforting. Carr tapped the top of the page. "I've included the clause you requested. Anyone who challenges the villainy immediately forfeits their share. No appeals, no loopholes." "Perfect," Evelyn said. "It's a strong statement. It's the only one they'll hear." By midday, the new will had been notarized, witnessed, sealed. The updated trust, now legally bonded to the Hart Legacy Foundation, stood locked behind Carr's secured filing cabinet. Greg, Marcy, the grandchildren, none of their names appeared in the primary distribution. Their era had been archived. Heather texted later that afternoon. "Heather, I can swing by with my camera. Just you this time?" Evelyn stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Evelyn, yes, just me. Bring black and white film." The sky had shifted by the time Heather arrived. Overcast light streamed in through the parlor windows, soft, moody, perfect. Evelyn wore a navy silk blouse, her late husband's watch still clasped to her wrist, her gray hair swept into a low chignon. No pearls this time, no floral brooch. She wanted nothing borrowed, nothing performative, just truth. Heather adjusted the lens, fingers moving delicately. "You ready?" Evelyn sat in the high-backed chair by the mantel, posture proud but unforced. She looked not at the camera, but just beyond it, like she saw something none of them ever would again. Heather clicked the shutter. Once, twice. The sound echoed across the silent room. They hung the framed portrait later that evening, a black and white 20x30 print, centered on the parlor wall where the Hart family photos had once been displayed. Evelyn stared up at it, studying her own eyes. They didn't look sad. They looked certain. She nodded, arms folded gently across her chest. "Let them stand under something true," she said quietly. Heather turned toward her. "You want me to take the others down?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. Every last one. Together, they removed the family gallery. One smiling frame at a time, Greg holding a sparkler. Marcy fake laughing near the garden. Claire's senior photo with Evelyn cropped from the edge. Evelyn stacked the old frames in a box and shut the lid without a second glance. She left the parlor quiet, clean, and hers. At 9:42 the next morning, Greg's phone rang. He was mid-call with a potential client, AirPods in, pacing his home office with half a smoothie in hand when the second line buzzed. "Carr, Jonathan, Estate Legal." He clicked over. "Carr? Everything all right?" There was a pause, then Carr's steady voice. "Your mother has revised everything. Effective immediately." Greg stopped pacing. "Everything? Her will, her trust, your access, your inheritance, your name." Greg's smoothie slipped from his hand and hit the rug with a dull splat. The front door didn't creak like it usually did. It slammed fast, hard, enough to shake the ceramic hummingbird that sat above the entryway. Evelyn didn't flinch. She was already pouring hot water into the teapot, the steam rising between her and the approaching storm that was her son. "Mom," Greg barked, rounding the kitchen corner like a prosecutor entering the courtroom. "What the hell is going on?" Evelyn placed the delicate blue and white china pot down on the wooden tray. 2 cups. Sugar. No cream. She looked up and smiled, the kind that always unnerved him because it revealed nothing. "Earl Grey," she said evenly. "Still your favorite?" He stood there, chest rising fast. His tie was crooked, a bead of sweat cutting through his temple despite the cool Charleston morning. "This isn't tea time, Mom," Carr just called. "Said you rewrote the trust. Rewrote everything." Evelyn turned and carried the tray to the sunroom, ignoring the heat in his voice. The china clinked gently as she set it on the table between the 2 wicker chairs overlooking the back garden. "I thought we might talk with some civility." Greg didn't sit. He loomed, hands on hips. "You're mad about that photo, aren't you? That's what this is. A tantrum over a goddamn picture." Evelyn didn't look up. She dropped a sugar cube into her cup and stirred slowly. "It's not just one." "Oh, come on." "I'm missing from 7, she said, voice like cut glass. "And not just the ones on your walls. The online albums, the framed ones Marcy gifts to friends, the ones Heather used to take, until she was told I was better behind the scenes." Greg laughed bitterly. "So you're doing all this out of spite? Because your feelings got hurt?" Evelyn finally looked up. Her eyes didn't waver. "You erased me first. I just followed your example." Greg blinked, stunned into silence for a heartbeat. Evelyn reached behind her and lifted a thick folder from the adjacent side table. She slid it across the table toward him. He opened it reluctantly. Inside, copies of tuition payments, Venmo screenshots, wire transfers labeled Emergency Dental, Derek, Claire's semester abroad, Marcy's boutique launch fund. A full decade of financial records, categorized and time-stamped, each entry as irrefutable as the next. "This estate," Evelyn said calmly, "ran on more than just photos and pretty captions. I kept this family upright. You kept me invisible." "You're twisting this," Greg muttered, flipping through the pages faster, as if velocity could change their contents. "No," she said, sipping her tea. "I'm straightening it." His phone buzzed violently on the table. A message from Marcy popped up in full view. What is she thinking? All those years we propped her up, and this is how she thanks us. Call Carr. Lawyer up. Now. He saw Evelyn read it. Saw her expression stay still. She picked up his phone, forwarded the message to herself, and then placed it down again as if it were no more than a napkin. "I'll send that to Carr," she said. "He'll want it for the file." "You're out of your mind," Greg spat. "No," Evelyn said, rising slowly, calmly. "I've never seen things more clearly." She left the sunroom with the teacup still warm in her hand. Behind her, Greg stood in a sea of papers and porcelain, watching the woman he thought he understood become someone he never really knew. The garland still hung from the porch columns, thick with pine and gold ribbon, but the lights weren't plugged in. Evelyn stood at the upstairs window, watching as Greg's SUV pulled into the long gravel driveway too fast, always too fast. Marcy stepped out first. Perfect hair, gloved hands, lips tight around a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The kids trickled out behind her, phones in hand, jackets half-zipped. They didn't look up toward the window. Evelyn stepped away from it before they reached the front steps. She never told them she wouldn't be attending the Christmas dinner. She simply didn't appear when they rang the bell. By then, the table had already been stripped of her silverware, the linen napkins folded and placed in a side drawer, untouched. Instead, Evelyn spent the evening in the smaller dining room, the one with the lace curtains and faded wallpaper her husband once insisted on keeping because it felt like someone's grandmother actually lived here. That night, it did. The table was set for 8, not 20. A roast chicken, not a glazed ham. Crystal glasses filled with sparkling cider, not wine. The guests were her staff Lucille from housekeeping, Daniel from grounds, the twins who helped with mail and errands, and 2 friends she hadn't seen since before the estate became a mausoleum for forced family holidays. They ate slowly, talked deeply, and laughed easily. Heather arrived just before dessert, camera in hand. I don't know if I should ask, but Evelyn lifted her glass. Take it. Take one that matters. The shutter snapped once, then again. No one posed. No one had to. The photo captured Evelyn mid-laugh. Eyes crinkled, half turned toward Daniel as he reenacted slipping on the ice outside the week before. A blur of silver tinsel hung in the background. Lucille's hand rested lightly on Evelyn's shoulder. There was no hierarchy in that room. No performance. Just presence. Later that evening, Evelyn printed the photo herself on Heather's portable printer. She dried it gently with a linen napkin and slid it into a walnut frame she retrieved from the drawer where last year's family portrait used to sit. She placed it on the mantel center. The original wall of family portraits had been taken down weeks ago. The plaster still bore faint outlines where frames once hung, but Evelyn didn't rush to repaint. She wanted the quiet echo of their absence to linger just a little longer. Down the hall, faint laughter drifted through the walls. Greg's voice rose over the others, rehearsed and booming. Marcy's laughter followed tight, controlled. Evelyn pictured them in the formal living room, gathered on the velvet couch, the same tired poses from the last 7 years repeating themselves like a carousel. But this time, there was no Heather to angle the lens, no soft filters to hide the tension. Evelyn didn't care to see the photo they would take. She already knew what it would look like. Stiff, curated, hollow. She turned in early, the house now silent but not empty. The warmth of the evening still clung to her cardigan like faint perfume cinnamon, pine, a hint of lemon from the dish soap Lucille insisted on using no matter how expensive the dishwasher. She was halfway through unbuttoning her blouse when she noticed it, a slim white envelope, tucked neatly under the door. Her breath caught. She bent slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as they reached for it. The envelope was unsealed, deliberate, as if to say, I'm not hiding anymore. Evelyn sat at her writing desk, the lamp casting a soft amber circle across the wood grain. She held the letter in both hands, careful not to smudge the ink, though the words had already bled slightly at the edges. Rain, perhaps? Or tears. Dear Nana, I know this is late. Too late, maybe. But I saw your photo. Not the one Dad took, the one with the silver tinsel and the real smile. The one where you looked like you belonged, finally. I didn't know how wrong we were. I'm sorry. Her eyes lingered on that last line longer than she meant to. It was written in tight, slanted cursive. Claire's hand, Evelyn would know it anywhere, even after years of birthday cards signed by Marcy, or not at all. You were always in the background. I didn't ask why. I just thought that's how it was. Like wallpaper, familiar, quiet, part of the house. A quiet laugh escaped Evelyn's throat. Wallpaper. She folded the letter once, precisely, and set it aside. The next morning, Claire arrived just before noon, without her parents. She was wearing a wool peacoat a size too big and carried a nervous smile like a fragile thing she wasn't sure she could keep upright. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me," she said, hugging herself as she stepped into the foyer. Evelyn gestured toward the sitting room. "You came alone. That's a start." They drank chamomile from matching porcelain cups, the kind Greg once called funeral china. The fireplace crackled low behind them, and the scent of orange peel and rosemary floated through the air from a simmer pot in the kitchen. Claire didn't say much at first. She let Evelyn speak, and Evelyn, for once, did. She told her about growing up during lean years, about a war bride mother who hid money in floorboards, about the nights she stayed up till dawn sewing dresses from old drapes. She spoke of falling in love with a man who built everything with his hands, including the original bones of the estate, and of how she raised Greg in a house full of intention, only to watch it become a stage. "They stopped listening to stories once they had cameras," Evelyn said, swirling her tea. "It's easier to crop people out of memories than out of money." Claire's eyes shimmered. "I didn't mean to be cruel. I just didn't think." "No," Evelyn said gently, setting her cup down. "You were taught not to." A long pause. Then Claire sat up straighter. "Do you still need help with that foundation? The one about what did you call inheritance of presence?" Evelyn smiled, but not with her lips. It was in the way her shoulders softened, in the way her hands unclenched. "I do," she said, "but I don't need help out of guilt. I need clarity. Can you bring that?" Claire nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Later that night, Evelyn opened the locked drawer in her writing desk and pulled out the revised estate papers. The edges were crisp, recently notarized. Her handwriting lined the margins with notes, addendums, firm decisions. She uncapped a pen and added one more name beneath hers, in clean ink strokes. Claire. The envelope from the Charleston County Probate Court arrived 2 weeks later, tucked in between a donation flyer and a grocery circular. But it didn't need bold stamps or heavy seals to make its message clear. Greg had filed a formal petition. "Challenge to revision of will and trust instruments," the header read. Evelyn stared at it for exactly 12 seconds before folding it neatly in half and placing it next to her teacup. She didn't call Judge Carr immediately. She didn't need to. He arrived in person the next morning. "Predictable," Carr said, removing his hat with the reverence of a courtroom oath as Evelyn ushered him inside. "Petulant, but predictable." They sat in the sunroom, Evelyn in her high-backed chair, Carr with his leather briefcase balanced on his knees like a sacred text. He handed her a single sheet of paper. "This," he said, tapping it, "is your firewall." It was the forfeiture clause, airtight, court-vetted, irreversible. The language had been written deliberately. Any party who disputes the contents of the revised trust shall forfeit all claims to its estate, holdings, or subsidiaries, effective immediately. Evelyn read it aloud, slowly. "They thought I was playing defense." Carr chuckled. "You were writing the rule book." By the following week, Greg and Marcy's household, was in a quiet spiral. A flagged audit alert landed in their inbox from the IRS, stemming from deductions tied to anticipated inheritance assets. Greg's name appeared on foundation documents he didn't own, linked to structures that now belonged to an entity with no heirs. Their financial advisor resigned. Their accountant stopped returning calls. Evelyn watched it unfold with a calm that came not from cruelty, but from clarity. She didn't relish their unraveling, she simply didn't interrupt it. She updated a ledger in her writing room and labeled the page, "Post, Freeze Impact." Beneath it, she jotted a single quote. "The difference between you and me? I plan in decades." The story gained local traction first. A quiet buzz through the Charleston circles that something seismic had shifted in the Hart estate. Rumors stirred about foundation filings, charity launches, power shifts. Then, a journalist from the Low Country Review called to request a statement. Evelyn declined. When the Post and Courier followed up, she paused. This time, she wrote one sentence, handed it to Carr, and let it be printed without revision. My wealth was never the story, my absence was. That sentence hit like a thunderclap. Letters poured in from women across the South, staff members from other estates, social workers, even a few old schoolmates. Claire printed each one, categorizing them in manila folders. Support, questions, media requests, donors. And then came the invite. A public announcement ceremony, a podium in front of the old estate, the original house portrait framed behind glass, the nonprofit's charter complete, the new board formed, the community curious. Evelyn stood before the mirror that morning in a deep navy suit, her hair pulled back simply. She clipped on her late husband's cufflinks, the ones shaped like twin oak leaves. Then she walked outside and into the waiting car. The sky was a soft gold when she stepped up to the podium. A small crowd had gathered. Claire stood to the side, clutching a clipboard and watching her grandmother with reverent pride. Heather held her camera low, waiting. Behind Evelyn hung the framed portrait, not the one they used for Christmas cards or social posts, but the original, the one from the year Greg was 8, holding a toy train, and Evelyn's hand rested gently on his shoulder. She was centered, present, visible. She glanced at the crowd. No Greg, no Marcy. She smiled. The launch photo wasn't staged. Evelyn made that clear. No ribbons, no speeches, no ceremonial oversized checks. Just a circle of chairs beneath the old magnolia tree. 12 women sitting shoulder to shoulder. Sunlight bleeding through the leaves like gold on water. Some of the women wore pearls. Some wore orthopedic shoes. One brought a therapy cat in a Sherpa-lined sling. And Evelyn, in slate gray linen and a pin shaped like a single open eye, spoke plainly. The world can't inherit what it refuses to see. This space is for those of us who were always in the room, just never in the frame. That afternoon, the Inheritance of Presence officially opened its doors. The nonprofit's mission was simple and devastating: to support elder women erased from family narratives, financial decisions, and generational memory. Claire became its first coordinator, not by request, by insistence. She handled intake forms, fielded emails from across the country, and replied to handwritten letters with notes of her own. She curated the story archive: photo albums, journals, oral histories recorded on a rusting cassette deck Heather donated from her studio closet. "Don't lose that sound," Evelyn had said when she first heard the whir of the tape. "It reminds people someone is listening." 1 week after the launch, Evelyn published an open letter titled Uncropped. It began with a sentence that halted readers mid-scroll. "My absence was never accidental. It was curated." She detailed moments of omission, birthdays where her name was never mentioned, emails forwarded without her CC, photos she posed for but never appeared in. Not with rage, but with restraint, the most dangerous tone of all. By Friday, the letter had 800,000 shares. By Monday, media outlets reached out for interviews. Evelyn declined every one. Greg and Marcy, however, moved quickly. Greg tweeted a photo from 10 years ago. Evelyn and baby Claire on the porch swing, blurred and underexposed. He captioned it, "She was always the heart of the family. We support her mission fully." Marcy posted a filtered photo collage with the hashtag number Legacy Matters. One frame was an old family dinner, Evelyn cropped to the edge like a napkin holder. The foundation's board issued a statement by noon. The Inheritance of Presence was built for the unseen, not the unseeing. This is not your story. Evelyn read it on her tablet, then opened her inbox. One email stood out. Subject line, "Hope we can reconnect." From Greg. She opened it. 3 sentences. No apology, no acknowledgement, just vague concern and a note about how they never wanted a rift. She tapped, held, and pressed delete. "Let them grieve a narrative they no longer control," she murmured. That evening, Evelyn walked the garden paths behind the cottage, Claire trailing beside her with a thermos of warm cider. "You changed something," Claire said softly. "Not just here. Everywhere." Evelyn didn't respond right away. She watched a blackbird hop along the edge of the fountain, wings twitching like punctuation. Then she said, "They wanted my wealth. I left them a mirror. What they do with the reflection isn't my burden. Claire sipped her cider, then glanced sideways. Would you pose with just me this year? She asked. One photo. Just us. Something honest. Evelyn stopped walking. She looked at her granddaughter fully for the first time that day. Only if we don't crop the edges, she said. No trimming the shadows. There was no oak tree, no brick facade of the family estate behind her, no wind-tossed children or white sweaters color-coordinated by Marcy. Just one chair, a stretch of linen drop-cloth, and the late afternoon sun burning gently against Evelyn's cheekbone. Heather crouched behind her camera, adjusting the light meter, then looked up. You ready? Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't adjust her collar or smooth her skirt. She simply sat. The wind rustled her curls slightly, silver strands glinting like thread pulled from moonlight. Ready. The shutter clicked once. Heather didn't need a second. Later that week, the photo was quietly uploaded to the Inheritance of Presence's homepage. No press release, no campaign launch. It simply appeared beneath the mission statement. A life does not need to be witnessed to be worthy, but we witness it now. In the image, Evelyn sat squarely in the frame, not centered, not minimized. No estate in the background, just the weight of presence, a woman, unadorned, unsmiling, completely seen. Claire posted it with a caption that didn't need hashtags. The woman who built the frame. By nightfall, it had been shared 22,000 times. A few days later, an email came in from Atlantic South magazine. Subject line, cover feature request, Evelyn Hart, a legacy reframed. Claire read it aloud, hesitating near the end. They're offering an 8-page spread, full editorial control. Evelyn didn't look up from the lavender she was bundling in her lap. Number. Claire blinked. Not even a quote? Evelyn set down the twine and dusted her palms off. The point was never to be seen, Claire. It was to see. What they ignored. What they erased. What they never asked to know. Claire sat beside her in the garden, swing and nodded. They'll ask again, she said. They always do, Evelyn replied. The responses to the photo ranged from reverent to stunned. My grandmother cried when she saw it. This looks like the woman I want to become. The kind of matriarch who changes the entire narrative quietly. Donations spiked. Volunteers signed up. A city council member asked to meet with Evelyn about a local initiative for senior visibility in healthcare access. Claire printed a copy of the portrait and slipped it into an envelope addressed to the city archives. You're going to live in records now, she teased. I always did, Evelyn said softly. They just shelved the wrong file. Across town, in a once busy kitchen now filled with silence and souring coffee, Greg scrolled his feed absently. A friend from his college days, someone he hadn't spoken to in years, had tagged him in a viral photo. At Grant Wilder, wasn't this your mom? Beneath it, the one frame portrait. No mansion, no Greg, no grandchildren, just Evelyn. Visible, unyielding. Greg stared at the screen, unreadable. Marcy walked in behind him, holding a tablet with a shopping list. Did you... She paused. Is that? He didn't answer. She took the tablet back to the counter and began typing again. The silence stretched so long. The refrigerator's hum began to sound like a ticking clock. At first, it was subtle invitations left unextended, texts read but unanswered. Then came the canceled lunch dates, the vague, maybe next week's, the neighbors who waved without stepping closer. Greg noticed it most at the country club. A few men he'd played doubles with for years now sat farther down the bar. One even got up mid-conversation and left his drink behind. The same drink Greg used to buy him. Marcy's book club went from 12 to 6, then to 4. Finally, they stopped meeting altogether. You'd think we burned the damn house down, she muttered one morning, arms crossed, scrolling through a now quiet Facebook feed. Her last photo of a fresh-baked pie next to a quote about family had one like. From her aunt, out of pity. They're all sheep, Greg said, jaw tight. No, Marcy replied. They're mirrors. Meanwhile, Evelyn's mailbox overflowed with handwriting. Notes from strangers, women she'd never met, arrived daily. Cream envelopes, lavender ink. One simply read, "You reminded me I matter." Another, from an assisted living home in Ohio, said, "My family told me I was too much. I'm sending this to say thank you for being more." Evelyn read each one, made tea, and wrote back. No typing, no copying. Each reply, a thread back to someone who had once been cropped out. She kept the letters bundled with ribbon, tucked in a drawer labeled, "Witnessed." Claire began her first semester at university in September, full scholarship, courtesy of the inheritance of presents. She called every Sunday. Always the same greeting. "Tell me something they never asked about." Evelyn would smile, usually while pruning her herbs, and share a slice of memory. Claire would listen like no one had ever listened to Evelyn before. One quiet morning, Evelyn sat at her writing desk, the same one where she'd once balanced ledgers and cut checks for college tuitions, home repairs, and unspoken emergencies. Now, it held only one book, her personal ledger. The inside flap read, "Hart Family Trust, 1,990, 2 to 2023. She flipped to the last page, drew a single line across the column, and beneath it, wrote, "Closed," with clarity. Then she closed the book for the final time. Heather arrived later that afternoon, a rectangular parcel in her arms. She handed it to Evelyn with a soft grin. "For the new wall," she said. Inside was the first framed nonprofit poster, the portrait of Evelyn seated alone, eyes lifted, history unwound behind her. Below it, the tagline, "The Inheritance of Presence, for every woman made invisible." The frame was simple. Oak, no gold trim, no gilded names. "It's more than beautiful," Evelyn said, her voice catching in her throat. "It's yours," Heather replied. "It always was." Evelyn walked the poster down the long hallway, the one that once bore generations of portraits curated by Marcy, always smiling, always centered. Now, there were faint squares of lighter wallpaper where the photos had once hung, the ghosts of false memories. She paused, looked at the poster one more time, and placed it precisely where the largest Hart family portrait had been. She stepped back. For the first time in years, the wall didn't lie. Greg stood in front of the mirror, tightening a tie he hadn't worn in 3 years. Narrative control, his new PR rep had called it. "You're not fighting facts, you're fighting perception." He didn't like the word facts. It always came loaded these days. Marcy adjusted his collar and said through a forced smile, "Let's remind people who you are." He exhaled sharply. "Who we are." The video went live the next morning, an exclusive sit-down with a sympathetic local podcaster and a well-lit backdrop showing black and white photos of the family estate. The framing, of course, was intentional. Greg spoke slowly, carefully. "My mother's health started declining. We tried to protect her privacy. Families are complicated." Marcy chimed in, tears barely blinking into place. "We never meant to leave her out. We love her. She's always been..." She paused, practiced. "She's always been the heart of this family." But the internet wasn't buying it. By noon, Evelyn's attorney, Judge Carr, had released a concise public statement through the Foundation's press office. All decisions referenced in recent statements were legally documented, notarized, and witnessed. Financial records, photographic evidence, and direct communications are on file. The Hart Foundation will not engage in narratives rooted in revision. Attached were redacted copies of years' worth of bank transfers, trust withdrawals, tuition payments, medical aid, Greg's signature on every request. Marcy pivoted next, uploading a long apology letter to Facebook. It opened with, "Sometimes people forget what matters most," and ended with, "We hope to find our way back to each other." The comments did not forgive easily. "Didn't forget her when you cashed the checks. You posed like she was already gone. You hope, after cropping her out for years?" The post was eventually deleted, but not before screenshots went viral. Claire saw it all from her dorm room. She stared at the screen for a long time, then opened her phone. Her fingers hovered over her parents' profiles, and then, with a breath, she unfollowed both. No announcement, just absence. She called Evelyn that evening. I saw what they posted. Evelyn didn't sigh, didn't gloat. She only said, "People scramble when their version of history collapses." 2 days later, Evelyn walked into Judge Carr's office with a quiet envelope in hand. Inside, her final legal revisions. She placed it gently on the table. "It's time," she said. Carr slid it open, skimmed the first line, and nodded. "Executor, Clare Hart." His lips pressed together, a small smile forming. "You're thorough. And bold." "Only one of those is new," she said. Letters poured in not from lawyers or banks, but from women. Hundreds of them. A retired librarian from Maine wrote, "My family sends cards that don't mention my name. You reminded me I'm not alone." A grandmother from Arizona, "You weren't erased, you multiplied. We're all here now." Each one a ripple in the still pond Evelyn had once sat beside, invisible. Now she stood at the center. One morning, a cream envelope arrived with a gold seal. No return address, just a crisp typeface. National Council for Elder Justice. Keynote invitation. Fall Summit, Washington, D.C. Clare found her in the garden, sleeves rolled, coaxing basil from its shaded corner. "Grandmother," she said softly, holding out the letter. "They want you to speak." Evelyn took it in both hands. The seal broke with a quiet crack. Her thumb brushed the paper. And then, the faintest smile. The lights above the podium warmed Evelyn's shoulders, but she didn't flinch. She stood still, palms flat on the cherrywood lectern, the faint hum of whispers dying down as the crowd leaned forward. The summit room was packed journalists, advocates, and survivors alike, and not one of them looked away. Her notes were in front of her, but she didn't read them. She looked out over the rows and let the silence hold. "I used to ask for a place," she began. Her voice, deliberate and textured, filled the room without needing to rise. "In the photo, at the table, in their memory." The crowd was so still, you could hear a throat clear halfway back. Then I realized, the frame didn't lack space, it lacked recognition. She paused, then lifted a single sheet of paper handwritten, edges worn from folding and unfolding. "This," she said, "is for the ones they cropped." Oh, whoa. The letter she read was not poetic, but surgical. She spoke of thankless bank transfers labeled gift, of holidays hosted but never honored, of the quiet theft of memory when photos erase the present to reframe the past. "Some of us aren't forgotten," she read. "We're intentionally removed, because we hold a truth the narrative can't afford." Some in the crowd wept openly. Others sat with jaws clenched, hands wrung in their laps. But Clare, seated in the front row in a charcoal blazer Evelyn had once worn to her own engagement party, didn't look away. She just nodded, slow and steady, as if witnessing someone reclaim a continent with a whisper. "Oh, wah." Evelyn closed the letter, folded it in two, and held it at her side. She didn't bow, didn't wait for applause. She simply stepped down from the stage, heels silent on the carpet, and walked straight through the aisle without a backward glance. The standing ovation followed her like a wave, but she didn't acknowledge it. That wasn't why she came. She came to finish something. Oh, whoa. Back home, the early evening light poured across the oak floors of the sitting room. Evelyn moved slowly now, not from age, but intention. Every action mattered. Every ritual had weight. She picked up a photo frame from the end table, silver-trimmed, simple, square. Inside was a candid photo, taken on a warm Sunday 2 weeks before. She and Clare sat on the back steps, both mid-laugh. Clare's head was thrown back, her coffee halfway to her lips. Evelyn's hand rested on her knee, a knowing smirk pulling at the corner of her mouth. The shot wasn't posed. It was real. She dusted the glass with the edge of her sleeve, polished it gently, and carried it to the main shelf. The old family portraits had been removed years ago. In their place were pieces of the life she'd chosen. The nonprofit's first flyer, a note from Tess, the groundskeeper, a Polaroid from her book club. She made room on the center tier, placed the frame, stepped back. The sun caught the silver rim just right. She looked at it for a long moment. And then, with a breath full of weight and clarity, she spoke softly to the quiet room, as if the walls themselves had been listening all these years. This is what a real legacy looks like. The garden smelled of lemon thyme and warm rosemary, kissed by late morning sun. A soft breeze nudged the linen napkins at each place setting, fluttering them like quiet applause. The long oak table, weathered and elegant, stretched across the patio Evelyn had once hosted Easter brunches on back when her presence was a requirement, not a formality. This time, there were no place cards for Greg, no specially requested gluten-free croissants for Marcy, no stiff backs of overdressed grandchildren. Instead, the seats were filled with women whose names Evelyn had come to know with reverence. Tess, who had kept the hedges trimmed through storms and silent seasons. Nora, who handled the nonprofit's donations with ferocious grace. A retired librarian who ran Evelyn's newsletter. And Clare, of course, seated at Evelyn's left, hair tied up in a knot she kept fiddling with between sips of lemonade. "Should we wait for Heather?" Clare asked, adjusting the table runner with one hand. "She's already here," Evelyn murmured, nodding toward the far corner of the yard. Heather stood back behind the viburnum hedge, camera in hand, lens-capped for now. She wasn't here to pose them. She was here to witness. I bow. By noon, laughter had settled into the garden like old music. Plates scraped clean. Coffee brewed and passed hand to hand. The women moved like a tide flowing between stories and silence, passing forks and inside jokes. Evelyn didn't pose. She sat under the climbing wisteria, a cotton wrap draped loosely over her shoulders, her teacup balanced gently on the armrest of a chair that used to belong to her late husband. The ceramic was warm in her palm. She could smell the faint bergamot from her garden, mix her own herbs, her own blend. And this moment, finally, was her own, too. Heather moved quietly. No instruction. No countdown. No say cheese. Just shudders, softly clicking like the echo of a heartbeat, catching moments mid-sentence, mid-smile, mid-living. At one point, Evelyn caught Heather's eye and gave her a single, nearly imperceptible nod. "Now. You can take it now." I bow. Later, when the chairs were stacked and the last slice of lemon tart had disappeared, Heather approached with the small camera screen still glowing. "I think I've got it," she said softly, holding it out. Evelyn took the camera without hesitation. On the screen, the image was bright, not in exposure, but in feeling. A long table mid-laughter. Clare with her eyes squinting from a joke. Nora reaching for a refill. Tess leaning back, utterly unbothered. Sunlight sliced through the branches above them, scattering soft shadows across the cloth and faces. And there, just to the side of the table, not centered, but unmistakably present, Evelyn, seated, smiling slightly, not at the camera, but at the life unfolding in front of her. Not a matriarch, not a financier, not a legacy, just a woman, living. I bow. Claire printed it the next day. She framed it in soft walnut, the kind Evelyn used to refinish by hand, and etched a single line at the bottom. The True Heart Family. They hung it in the front foyer of the nonprofit's Charleston office, just across from the elevator. You didn't have to ask who was in the photo. You felt it. And Evelyn? She didn't attend the unveiling. She stayed home that morning, seated in her sunroom with her tea and her dog asleep at her feet. She opened her leather-bound journal, the one she'd been quietly filling all year, and wrote one final line, slow and firm across the last page. I was never missing. They just refused to look. She closed it, hands resting flat across the cover.